Hi everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today we're back underneath our 1976 Dodge D100 pick-em-up truck, and we're going to start getting the front end put back together. Here's all our control arms and sway bar and the strut rods and stuff like that, all cleaned up, painted. I didn't go to the extent of getting it all sandblasted. I'm going to be driving this thing up and down dirt roads, and it's just going to be a truck. There's no need for that. We scraped off the worst of it, wire wheeled it, and gave it a coat of semi-gloss black trim clad. It looks good, and it'll look good for a while. Here's all the new stuff we're going to be putting into it. Lots of stuff. This, I don't know, Mevotech stuff. I've used it quite a bit, and I'm starting to be confident in it. It's no better or no worse than any of the other stuff that's out there, is what I've found anyway. And here is all of our hardware all ready to go, so we don't have to mess with stuff and fight and fumble with things as we're putting it together. We just grab and go. First thing we're going to work on is the lower control arms. On the surface, it would appear that they are the same left and right, but they are not. And I'll tell you what makes them a left or a right. It's here where the bushing goes in. This side, the bore, is slightly bigger than this side because it's really hard to tell. But you can see there, the bushing's got a bit of a step in it. Goes in that way, but it won't go in that way. And that is the front of it. So that's easy. We'll go over to the press and push these in. Then we'll get the ball joints put in. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to support the back side of the control arm with this little piece of pipe here. We're going to push on the outer sleeve of it with this socket. And we're going to use this socket in here. It's just a tiny bit of a snug fit, just to make sure that we don't crush the channel of the control arm while we're pushing it in. That'll just give it a little support, and that's all we need. There, and then we'll load it up. Let it sit for a sec. That's good. She's home. Now we'll push the lower ball joints in. And down she goes. They're a pretty tight fit. They've got a little bit of knurl or spline on them that the other ones didn't have. Holy Toledo! Hang on, I'm going to need two hands. Man, that's a tight fit. But it's in. Now I've got the dust boot to go on. These are actually nice. You can see there they've got grooves. These are really nice parts. So you put that down over there. And this thing is actually the tool to put it on that it came with. Perfect. Now all that's left is to screw the grease fitting into it. And this is done. All right, now we can get this together. We have the lower control arm in. We've got the nut run down but not tightened. We cannot torque that nut until the truck is at ride height with weight on it. So we'll put it up the ramps to do that once we've got everything done. But you want it snugged up so you can just move it. Just like that. That's good. And we've installed a new jounce bumper on either side. We're going to get this thing together. First thing is to get the spring up in its pocket here. And then we're going to pull the control arm up. And the tail of the spring, you'll see, fits in this little groove here where my thumb is. So we just turn the spring around till we've got that there in the right spot. There. Now we get the jack underneath it. There we go. And slowly, slowly up she goes. And you got to be really careful because, well, the spring could fly. Lucky that this piece of chassis here, if the spring comes out, it'll stop it from hitting us in the face. But who knows where it could go. Okay, it's starting to take the truck off the stand, so we know we've got up far enough. Now we're going to get our new shock absorber, and these are an upgrade or an improvement from what was in it. They've got the large bore with the large shaft and large piston. So we're gonna slide that baby up in there, and sorry if the camera's not pointing the right way. The stem goes up through the hole in the frame. There we go. There we got our upper bushing. And the washer. And start the nut on. Okay. Now we've got to get on the creeper and push the bottom of the shock up and get these two bolts started. I'll be back when I've got that done. All right, once we got them in, we run them up, torque them to 25. So we run the nut down on the top of the shock until the rubber just comes kind of just flush with the washer. That's kind of the unwritten rule on those. And it coincidentally, at the same time that happened, we ran out of threads and it tightened up. So that's the shock done. Now we can install our strut rod, and we're doing a few different things with this. First thing we did was we knocked out the remains of the old split pin. It's a 1/8 split pin that used to be in here that keeps the nut from spinning off. And then we drilled it out. It's a 1/8 hole. We drilled it out to 9/64. So we'll put a 1/8 cotter pin in there instead, and hopefully, you know, it's got a little bit more wiggle room and it won't get stuck in there like this thing did. Next, what we're going to do, this rubber bushing here, this is a double or an eyelet style sway bar link. So one end is an eyelet around the strut rod here, and the other end has got the traditional end link with the rubbers at the sway bar. You cannot get these rubbers anywhere. So the only way to get them that I found was either you have to find NOS ones, or I bought a complete polyurethane kit for the entire sway bar. It's energy suspension. So what we're going to do now is just soap this up, and this guy will slide right off, and we could slide this guy on. Just use some hand soap. Works great. And then we're going to be utilizing this allegedly improved style strut rod bushing. And although this looks backwards, that's exactly how they tell you in the instructions to put it. See? So we're going to follow the directions and put it together. So despite the size of these great big, they're 3/4 inch threads. It only torques to 50 foot-pounds, and that's right from the manual. I looked it up. So we'll do that. And drop in our cotter pin. And we're all set at this end. And these ones here, they're 1/2 inch grade 8 bolts. They torque to 85. Just like so. All right, now we're going to put the upper control arm bushings in. When you get them, you'll see there's a couple of notches in them. Nobody in the world knows what they're for. I kind of think it's got to do with indexing them when you use the offset. They have offset style bushings to help you if you're having trouble getting your caster. And they probably use the same outer shell. That's only a guess. Anyway, so we're going to do that. And we've got just a mock-up of washers and hunks of sleeve and stuff. Make sure when you put it in, you push on the outer sleeve. Don't push on that, because all you'll do is compress the rubber. And then we just stack up a few washers and whatnot there. Put a nut on it, and instead of making a bunch of noise with the impact gun, we'll twist it in with a ratchet. And don't put any lubricant or grease or oil or anything on these when you push them in, because you're relying on that press fit, right, in the bore to hold the thing in place. So there, that's just how easy it is. Good. Now, what we've got to do, on the rearward bushing, we've got to put the strengthening sleeve or the reinforcing sleeve on the outside of it, right? That's this guy. He goes on there like that. Now, if I remember how I did this, I think I used a 1 5/16 socket. Okay. Yeah, see that goes over there, but pushes on that. There we are. A lot of grunting and groaning, and we got it on. Now we can install our rebound bumper. Now we need to install the ball joint, and the best way to hold the control arm to do that is to just stick it on the truck. So we stick the control arm and just stick one old 1/2-inch bolt through the front side of it there. And now we're going to screw a ball joint in, and I can tell already this one's going to be loose. You should, these things screw in, and you should be able to torque them to 125 foot-pounds. If they won't torque to 125 foot-pounds, don't fret. You just put a little tack of weld on either side of them, and they're fine. There we are. A couple of tacks and the ball joints are good to go. Millions and millions and millions of Chrysler ball joints have been welded in over the years. It's no big deal. It's just what you have to do sometimes. Now, before we put this control arm in for keeps, I want to talk about the cam bolts. So here you can see is one of the original factory ones. Unfortunately, I was only able to save 2 of them. The other 2 were destroyed when I took it apart. So normally on a car, like an A body, B body, etc., you turn them by here, right? You just put a wrench on there and you turn the cam by the inboard side, because the bolts go from inboard to outboard. That's so it gives you at least a chance to be able to drive them out when they're stuck in there. Unfortunately, on these trucks, the inboard end of the cam bolt is down in there, and there's not really an easy way that you'd be able to, maybe if you had a really fine-tooth ratchet, you'd be able to turn it, but that's just not going to fly. So what the factory did was they gave you this little 5/16 hex on the end of it, so you could turn it. Great idea. So when I bought new bolts, they came like this. And these are just the Chrysler bolt. Trucks, cars, everything. I didn't see any like this. So I said, man, I'll just look up the Mopar part number and find some NOS ones on eBay. I only need 2 of them. But no, there's nothing. When you look them up at Chrysler, they supersede up to the car ones, and they're discontinued anyway. So I said, what am I going to do? So I'm looking at these original ones, and I see this extra hole in it, right? See that? So what I did was, I drilled the same hole in my washer here, and we made this little tool. So you can see there, it'd be like that in the truck. This thing slides over the nut, engages that, and you could turn it with a 9/16 wrench. Works pretty well. I experimented on the other side already. So once we've got it in, we're able to turn. You can see there, we could turn our cams with this, and it's all good. Now that we've got them in, I used that hole as an index as to where the cam was originally. And the front one and the rear one were both at 5 o'clock. So right now it's at about 4 o'clock. So we're going to use our little tool here and turn our cam down to 5 o'clock, about there. And that'll get us kind of in the ballpark as to where the wheels need to be pointing when we set the alignment. And once we got that, we snug the nuts up just to kind of hold it together, but not enough to crimp you see the entire bushing moves, right? We don't want the bushing locked down to the frame because we can't torque that until it's all adjusted and the vehicle's at ride height with the weight on it. Otherwise, we'll twist up the rubber in the bushings and tear them all to pieces. Now we can put our spindle together. The spindles are a 2-piece affair on these. So we're going to start first with we'll call this part the steering arm. You can see there, when you steer to full lock, that's what contacts the stopper on the end of the strut rod. And we're going to get that on there and just run this nut down. There we go. We'll torque it after. Next, let's see if I can get this aimed up a little bit here. We've got the actual spindle, and we're going to get that on the upper ball joint. And this one, it's got a washer that goes with it. The lower one didn't come with a washer, but the upper one did. So we'll get that started on there and get that wound up. Good. Then we're going to put the jack under the control arm, under the lower arm, and push the lower control arm up until we can get these bolts through here. These guys torque to 215 foot-pounds. Once we've got that done, we can, it's the same socket, 15/16. We can run this up, and this torques to 135, and then you advance it to the first opportunity to get the cotter pin through. It might not be easy to see, but this one landed almost exactly where it needs to be. It just needs a tiny little tweak, and we can get the cotter pin through. There we are. Now we'll do the same job on the bottom. Okay, we finished our knuckle up by installing the caliper adapter, and these two bolts torque to 100 foot-pounds, and we installed the splash shield for the rotor, 20 foot-pounds, 18 to 20 on those. They're just little 5/16 bolts. I've hung a new idler arm on it. This little spring, it's a secondary diaphragm spring from a Holley carburetor. This silly dust boot didn't want to sit right down on there, so I got that on there, and it just keeps a little downward pressure on it. That's all that's for. Anyway, I've got the bolts snugged up but not tight. And what you want to do is you want to look across here. It's really hard to see, but over on the other side you can see the pitman arm, and we want to make sure the eyelet where the center link goes in is perfectly parallel with the one on the pitman arm. And this one is not right now. The holes give you a little give, so we're gonna give it a few taps. Almost. There, we've got it. Perfect. Once we've got our center link in, it's the same as all the other stuff. The book says torque this to 47 foot-pounds, and then we'll advance it to the next position to get the cotter pin in. Now we're going to build up our tie rods. We want to get them close to the length of our original ones, if we can. That'll just make it a little easier when we go to do the alignment. The one with the right-hand thread is the inner one, and it gets a grease fitting like this because it's kind of up against the cross member, and you have to steer the wheel one way or the other to grease the inner tie rod ends. So the easiest thing to do is just put a 90 on it. There's room. When we've got the length as close to this as we can get it, then we can go ahead and install it on the truck. These guys, tie rod ends, torque to 40 foot-pounds. And then we move them to put our cotter pins in. Now we're going to install the sway bar links. They clamp around this piece of this rubber bushing here that's on the strut rod. The entire sway bar is upgraded to a polyurethane kit because I couldn't get these bushings in rubber anymore, so I just got the whole kit. These things, one was broken and the other one was rotted nearly clear through, so I made new studs and welded them in. It's a little tricky to get these things clamped over the polyurethane, but I've come up with a kind of a two-step thing with a pair of vice grips. That I get it on. Anyway, I'll see you when I've got it. Okay, so we got these goofy things in. It was fun, but we got it. And now we've got the sway bar hung, and all the bolts are tight and everything, so we're looking good. Now we got to put the brakes together. Now we can start on the brakes. There's not much to do here, but we do have to change the bearings because the races are pitted. So I'm going to get these things knocked out of here. You just use a hammer and a punch. We've got it sitting up on a piece of metal so that the race can actually, there. That's the outer race out. And we'll get the inner one out now. It doesn't have to sit. Let's see here. You can see there all the pits. This bearing somewhere along the line is sat with water in it. That's no good. Okay, we got the inner one out. Now we've got to get all this old grease out of this hub. So here we are at the press. We're going to push our new bearing in. We're using our old bearing with a slice cut in it with a zip wheel. That way it doesn't get stuck in there. It comes out easy. And we're just going to push on it with this great big old washer. A little tight in here, but I'm too lazy to move the table on the press. There. Okay, let me get the ram down. Okay, that should go in. There she goes. And it just goes right in, and you just run it down until it stops. Uh-oh. We got to stack something else on there. No worries. I forgot. That goes in a little further because of the seal. Oh, we'll just grab another old bearing. There we go. Oh no, that's it. She's home. Okay, good. So here we go. First step, we've smeared a bunch of grease into the hub. Now what we got to do is pack this bearing. Now there's two ways you can do it. You can get a bearing packer that you use a lever grease gun on, but I want to have all the grease the same. I don't know if it matters or not, but there seems to be some green grease in these, and I've got the honey colored grease in this. So we're going to do it the old way. You go like that. Best to have a glove on, I guess. And then you just start with your bearing. You just go like that. And you'll see there the grease comes out the top. There, that's how you pack a bearing. The old way. Once we got it packed, in it goes. Now we can put our seal in. We don't need to pack behind the lip because it doesn't have a spring in it. So all we have to do is find a suitable driver and knock it in. Let me see what I can find. So we got this here hunk of pipe. That'll work just fine. There we go. We just get her down flush. Now we're packing the outer bearing the same way. So we've smeared some grease on the spindle, especially back here where the seal goes. And now we can slide our rotor on. There we go. And a little bonus grease for the next one. So now we got to put this guy on. And then our nut. Now I'll start winding her down. When we get close, we'll start turning the... That'll help us set the bearings.
It is a perfect Sunday afternoon here in Central Florida.
Here comes a bunch of grease out. There you go. So you just get this, you just reap it up, and then back it off a hair.
This might be the biggest crowd I've seen here in quite some time. This is the most unpredictable race in NASCAR.
Hang on. There. And then we're going to start looking for whichever way this thing goes on, that it lines up with the groove there, so we could drop our cotter pin in.
As we come to lap 11, the Joe Gibbs teams will come.
And then just, some people put the cotter pin in sideways and bend the two tails that way, but this is how I do it. I don't think there's really a right and a wrong, but. And then the last step is to put the hubcap on. And as tempting as it is to just smash the end of it with a hammer, don't do that. It's so easy to just grab an old hunk of exhaust pipe. I was going to buy new ones till I found out they're 20 bucks. There we go. It's touching the dust shield in one little spot somewhere. Right there. Let me grab a screwdriver. There we go. There, that's better. Now I'm going to grab some brake clean and clean this grease off the face of the rotor. Then we can put the caliper and the pads on. So now we can actually put the brakes on. First thing we do is, that's the thickness of the rotor. So when it gets certified, they need to measure that. So I'll save them from measuring it if they believe me. Anyway, now we can put the brakes on. The first part is the easiest part. Just the inboard pad goes on like that. The outboard pad goes on here. Now they usually kind of fall in, but this one's a little snug. Now I'll just make sure we've got the piston retracted, and that'll at the same time squeeze the old fluid out of the caliper. Now we can go put it on the truck. And it just sits right in there like that. Now let me get these. Okay, now we just put the hold downs on. And we'll torque them to 25 foot-pounds. There we go. Now all we got to do is get the flex hose back in this little bracket here. You just got to turn it the right way. So it only goes in the bracket one way. There we go. Now you can screw the hard line back into the back of it. There we go. Now all we got to do is bleed them. I'm not going to bore you with that because we've bled enough brakes together. That's all good. We got the other side bled up and made sure we've got lots of fluid in the master cylinder. So that's it. We're done. All I got to do now is I got to put the wheels back on it and take it outside and just kind of run it around the yard a bit just to let everything kind of settle in. And then we'll bring it in. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to do a nice alignment at home. So that was a lot of work, and I'm sorry if this one runs a little long. I get the feeling that it may. I'll find out when I edit it. Anyway, it was a great job to get done, something I've been looking forward to getting done. We all learned a little something together, I guess. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll come back and see us again next time. And until then, I'm Kevin, saying so long from the Claremont Classic Garage.